Remember,
Alright,
we're
look,
just
this is a
introducing
presentation
Project You're
about
doing
this
this
coffee, not about your damn
Alright.
coffee, alright?
I am
Alright.
Patrick
Action.
Mitchell.
Just
Introducing
don't mention
the
it.
All right, now I'm.
Okay, ready?
Ah,
Take
ah,
27.
Burnt my tongue
Action.
there. Burnt my tongue there.
Cut.
I did most of the editing.
A little bit
Actually,
hot,
all
but-
the editing.
Cut!
Yeah, Tom's
the hell?
favorite
Give me that
sauce
cup.
project.
It's
Sydney
empty.
raided the fridge and
What? You're drinking from an
I
empty
did
cup,
a little
dude.
bit of
It
the
had
helping with the
coffee.
writing
No,
out
there is
script
no
and
liquid.
stuff.
It is bone
So,
dry.
Yeah. Yeah,
it wasn't on
narration's
take
pretty much
two.
the easiest part of his job. I mean, even now I'm just sitting in a chair, drinking coffee. Ow. That was kind of fun.
The story of Islam's origins begin in the Middle East between 2100 and 1500 BC with a man named Abraham. Abraham is widely considered to be the father of the Jewish people and of Islam. When his wife thought that she wouldn't be able to bear a child at her age, she suggested that Abraham have a child with their servant, Hagar. A few years later, after Abraham and Hagar's son, Ishmael, was born, Abraham's wife had a child, and Abraham sent Hagar and Ishmael away to the desert. Historians believe the two traveled 1,000 miles before reaching a sacred well, where they settled and established a town that would soon grow to become Mecca. When Ishmael became an adult, Abraham was said to have visited. They built the Kaaba, a temple dedicated to God. In the wall of the Kaaba, they placed what was known as the Black Stone, which was believed to have fallen from heaven to the earth as a sign of a covenant between mankind and God. In the centuries to follow, Arab polytheists would fill the Kaaba with many idols, using the temple to God as a shrine for their own beliefs, where many Arabs from all over came to pray and worship. Give or take 2,000 years later, Muhammad is born in Mecca in about 570 AD. On the night of his birth, the sky is said to have glowed from a bright light above. His parents died when he was young. He grew up to work as a trade agent for, and later marry, a wealthy widow, and became a successful caravan merchant with many children. Then one day, in the year of 610 AD, Muhammad went to meditate in a cave on the mountain Hira, outside the city of Mecca. There, he met the angel Gabriel, who told him of his duty as the final prophet of God to spread his message to humankind. To clarify this, in Muslim belief, there were thousands of prophets called upon by God to spread his word. 25 of these prophets are known by name, including Adam, who was the first, Abraham, Moses, David, Jesus, and Muhammad, who was the last. Basically, God had a final set of revelations to deliver, and he needed Muhammad to do it. Following the revelations imparted on him by God, Muhammad began preaching monotheism, as well as the evils of idolatry, in 613. At first, he and his followers were tolerated, as Muhammad's preachings weren't seen as too big of a threat to the status quo. However, as he started to gain momentum, he became more unforgiving in his preachings of the evils of idol worship. Eventually, the local merchants saw him and his followers as a threat to the local economy, as an end to idol worship would mean an end to the pilgrims that brought business to Mecca. To combat this, Muhammad and his followers were accused of heresy and forced to flee Mecca in 622 AD. In a pilgrimage known as the Hijra, Muhammad and his followers fled to the nearby city of Medina. The Hijra is considered important because it both marks the beginning of the Muslim calendar and the beginning of Islam as an organized religion. While in Medina, Muhammad attempted to form alliances with Jews and Christians on a basis of shared monotheism. When this failed, he changed the direction of prayer from Jerusalem to Mecca, and used his military skill to resist attacks on Medina from Mecca, and in the year 630 AD, to launch his own 10,000-man assault on the city of Mecca. Once in Mecca, Muhammad ordered the destruction of all idols in and around the Kaaba, restoring the temple to its previous state. Muhammad went on to conquer most of the Arab Peninsula. In 632, he died unexpectedly of a fever. His tomb is considered one of Islam's holiest sites. When Muhammad founded Islam, he established himself as the leader of all those of the faith. When he died, however, he did so without naming a successor, creating a problem for the Muslim community. Upon Muhammad's death, his closest disciples met to elect a new caliph, or successor, to Muhammad. A caliph is elected for life, and is expected to guide those who are faithful based on the virtues of Islam. The first 4 caliphs to be elected were called the rightly guided caliphs, who were believed to have led exemplary lives and done much to spread Islam. The first caliph was Abu Bakr, who was Muhammad's father-in-law. He ruled from 632 to 644, subduing revolts in Arabian tribes while converting them to Islam. The second caliph, appointed by Abu Bakr before he died, was Umar, who ruled from 634 to 644, and he made it his goal and accomplishment to conquer and convert much of the Middle East. The third caliph, Uthman, who ruled from 644 to 656, oversaw the Muslim conquest and conversion of Iran and much of northern Africa. However, political divisions were ignited under his rule, as many saw him as too caring for wealth and material things. He was eventually killed. The final rightly guided caliph, Ali, who, as Muhammad's son-in-law, was the closest to a relative of Muhammad, had been asked to rule as a third, but refused until he was asked again after Uthman died. He ruled from 656 to 661. By the end of their rule, the rightly guided caliphs had done much to spread Islam far and wide. After the rightly guided caliphs, the position of caliph was taken up by dynasties and became hereditary. The first dynasty was the Umayyads, who ruled from 661 to 750 AD, in their capital of Damascus. As Muslims expanded their empire, many non-Arabs were brought under their rule. Under the Umayyad dynasty, these non-Arabs were treated as second-class citizens, receiving lower wages than Arabs with the same job, and being denied placement in high-ranking government positions. This could have included France as well as much of Europe, but the Muslim advance was halted at the Battle of Tours, where they were defeated by Charles Martel. The Umayyads acted more as political leaders than religious leaders, reorganizing postal routes and building magnificent mosques. This, along with their discrimination against non-Arabs, led to many attempted revolts. At the same time, disputes over how the caliph should be chosen led to a split in the Muslim faith, between the Shiite.
The peaceful protesting. From the footage seen, I don't think any of this footage is peaceful at all.
Who believe that only descendants of Ali can hold the title of caliph, and Sunnis, who believe that anyone who is sufficient for the job can hold the title of caliph. This schism would soon become significant in almost every dispute regarding Islam. As for the issue of dynasties, eventually a group called the Abbasids supported the non-Arab Muslims and successfully overthrew the Umayyads in 750 AD. Their rule lasted until 1258 AD. Unlike the Umayyads, whose main goal was mass conquest and conversion, the Abbasids mostly focused on maintaining stability in the empire and further developing Arab culture. Due to the wide and rapid spread of Arabic culture under the Umayyad rule, so many people from outside Arabia came to embrace their culture that the term Arab came to mean someone who was Muslim and spoke Arabic. One major goal of the Abbasids was to make the city of Baghdad, which was a major trade center, into their capital, which they did in 762 AD. In Baghdad, they built the City of Peace, a governmental complex made up of mosques, housing for public officials, and the Caliph's palace. To increase trade, the Abbasids took advantage of the Persian Gulf and Euphrates River, which both connected directly to many foreign powers and ran right through Baghdad. The wide access to the world provided by Baghdad caused Muslim arts and sciences to flourish. Life changed rapidly as knowledge, culture, and literature flooded into the Islamic Empire, which led to the establishment of libraries, several schools of Islamic law, and Muslim men wearing pants. A mystic sect of Islam, called Sufism, emerged under Abbasid rule. Sufis fast and meditate to achieve a more perfect unity with God, and can be either Sunni or Shiite. Further growth of the empire led the Caliph to divide his power among smaller, independent kingdoms, which ruled from 929 AD to 1031 AD. The caliphs of these kingdoms proved to be weak, and often bended to the will of military dictators. During this time, groups of Muslim Turks from Central Asia invaded the Arab Empire, conquering Baghdad in 1055 AD. Arab power began to deteriorate by the end of the 1000s, and completely collapsed in 1258 AD when the Mongols conquered Baghdad. The legacy of the Abbasid Empire was one of a greatly enriched culture that had led to the creation of many new ideas. Muslims and Christians had contact and trade since the Battle of Tours in 732. Through such contact, Muslims tended to see Christians as primitive and barbaric, and thus were shocked when Christians crusaded for 200 years to recapture Jerusalem from Muslim control. There were 7 crusades altogether. The city of Jerusalem passed back and forth between Muslims and Christians for the first 3, with the remaining 4 being failed attempts from European Christians to recapture the city. For Europeans, they were a military disaster. Muslims, save for those in the area of the Holy Land, were barely affected. The effects of the Crusades on the West carried a lot more weight than in the East. 200 years of exposure to Muslim culture had allowed Europeans to ascend out of their period of darkness by taking example from advancements in science, math, shipbuilding, culture, and other areas. This soon made the West a force to be reckoned with, testing the powers of the Muslim empires. The Mongol invasion of Baghdad and the resulting fall of the Muslim imperial powers that left Mongols in charge marked a significant point in Muslim history, as the first time since the rightly guided caliphs that Muslims were ruled by a non-Muslim power. The Mongols, once a loose band of nomadic tribes inhabiting the inhospitable lands of northern Asia, were unified under the rule of Genghis Khan, a ruthless and extremely well-skilled military commander. He turned the Mongols into one of the most skilled and disciplined fighting forces in history. The invasion by the Mongols suspended Muslim political power and influence, but not their religion or culture. The Mongols soon became assimilated into Muslim customs and beliefs. Many converted to Islam, and the Mongol Empire became a catalyst for the faith and the customs of those who followed it. Through trade and conquest, the Mongols spread Islam to West Africa, present-day Malaysia, Indonesia, China, and Africa south of the Sahara Desert. This cultural diffusion of Islam led to a worldwide Muslim community that would become a major global power in days to come. After the rule of the Mongol Empire, Muslim power was centered around the Ottoman Empire from Turkey, the Safavid dynasty of Iran, and the Mughal Empire of India. The Ottoman Empire existed from about 1300 to 1922. They were originally a band of nomadic tribes that migrated from Central Asia to the Middle East, claiming to be the experts and devout followers of Sunni Islam. In 1453, they captured the Byzantine capital of Constantinople, making it their capital and renaming it Istanbul. They moved to take control of lands governed by the collapsed Byzantine Empire, as well as areas once controlled by the old Muslim Empire, which include present-day Iran, Saudi Arabia, and Syria. The Ottomans experienced a golden age from about 1520 AD to 1566, under the ruler Sultan Suleiman I, when Islamic arts and sciences flourished and the empire was most unified. The empire began to decline in the 17 to 1800s, when European imperialists colonized their lands and competed with them economically. They collapsed when they were defeated at the end of World War I. The Safavid dynasty, who converted to Shi'ism from Sufism in the 1500s along with the rest of Iran, rose to become the main rivals of the Ottoman Empire, constantly fighting them without gain throughout the 1600s. This constant fighting drained both sides of resources, leaving the Safavids to crumble in 1722, and the Ottomans more vulnerable to military aggression. The Mughal Empire of India was founded by Prince Babur from Central Asia in 1526. He conquered through military supremacy with the use of firearms. The rise of the Western Europeans had come as a surprise to those in the East, as their previous major encounter, the Crusades, had shown the Europeans to be primitive and barbaric in the Muslims' eyes. However, the scientific achievements of the 17th and 18th centuries, and the revolutions of the 18th and 19th centuries, had increased the strength of all of Western Europe. This, along with the waning strength of the Muslim empires, was put into perspective when Napoleon conquered Egypt, though he was defeated by the British 3 days later. European imperialism led to European countries controlling most of Islamic territory, with the exception of Arabia, Iran, and Turkey, and eventually dividing the Ottoman Empire amongst themselves following the defeat of the Ottomans at the end of World War I. Further independent Muslim states began to emerge after colonialism ended in World War II, with some countries gaining independence through peaceful negotiation, while others fought bloody wars for freedom. Even with the independence of most of the Muslim world, colonialism left a humiliating legacy on the Muslim world. While some come to terms with their new relations with the West, others strive for the Muslim unity once enjoyed by those in the Middle East.